I know, I'll get it too. Alright. Okay. So headphone out. Mia, headphones. Johnny, focus. Johnny.
Is Aiden dead?
Okay. Caleb.
Probably.
So, the story that we're reading today has a little bit of background required. It's about the 9/11 attacks. So the September 11th attacks on the Twin Towers in New York. That's what this piece that we're reading today deals with. Okay, so we should not be laughing on it because this is not a fun topic.
I swear to God.
No, I want you to be serious. You're serious about it. Okay. So follow along with me as I read.
What page is this?
Johnny, why do your phone out? Good morning. Just on your modules, kid. The attacks of September 11th, 2001 brought expressions of sympathy from around the world. The attacks sparked feelings of patriotism among many Americans, but some became distrustful of Arab immigrants and others of perceived Middle Eastern descent. Many Americans also questioned the nation's immigration and visitation policies. Okay, so when we're talking about prejudice and racism, the prejudice against the Arab countries and immigrants from the Arab countries in that time period was like at an all-time high, right? So this is kind of what this is dealing with. So go ahead and go to page 3 of your textbook. So Nate, Mia, remember you go to my.hrw.com.
Are you there?
Thank you, Nate. Hi, Joe. All right, so you're going to go to page 3. 3. Yeah, Faith, you don't really need it yet unless you're just following along. All right, so you're going to go to page 3 in your online textbook. Sorry. The textbook or your...
I know, I have. Like several.
Then, yeah, it's not worth it. And blue tape.
Don't spill this giant thing everywhere. You don't say. It's not just like
Page 3?
I'm pretty sure this water bottle is water.
Mine.
She knows the other throat.
Have I ever done a pen page 3 or page 3?
Why?
Why? That's so random.
Did anybody might have to grab a...
Okay, if you're looking at it, why don't you say I said
Okay, she needs Firefox.
Oh,
Let's see if this works.
did mom do this to you?
Yeah, Mia, so go to Firefox. That's where
Who did this to you?
Oh, was it the login?
Isn't it
Well, no, it's what's the
I don't have that.
No, I color check
He's
here.
not actually using
And then I rub it on the water bottle.
Oh, I have it.
Yeah. What? Full of green pen. Oh, wait, this one. Oh, okay. Prove yourself wrong today. The holes inside.
So we'll go through
I'm just American.
Okay, so, go to Firefox.
It's so close.
Why did I throw away your box?
Or use,
Something just clicked.
I'm not arguing with you. I think that you might be correct.
all right.
I get one more. It's not like, oh, you're supposed to be that.
Yeah, that's what you're looking at.
Okay, I saw Romeo and Juliet. And I'm like,
Oh, I think it was part I loaded. All right, eyeballs back in 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, eyeballs, Mary. So let's go ahead and read the background, okay? Nate, are you with me?
What?
Author Anna Quinlan, born in 1953, was born in Philadelphia. She is a columnist and an author who has been described as having a common touch because so many people relate to her writings about politics and gender-specific issues. In 1992, she became the 3rd woman to win a Pulitzer Prize for commentary. A Quilt of a Country was published after the World Trade Center attacks of September 11th, 2001. The argument was written at a time when many people were thinking about what it means to be an American. So what type of text is this? What did I just read? Nope.
Nonfiction.
What did I just read?
Culture class.
Anybody?
Culture.
Was anybody paying attention or should I read it again?
It's an argument.
It's an argument. Well, guys, look. The argument was written. Alright, are we all focused now?
No, wait, I didn't know argument was an actual type of
You will write an argumentative essay.
Oh, I think
We are writing an argumentative essay Friday.
What?
Alright,
What are you doing on lipstick?
so.
Chapstick.
Nate, who asked for that? Who asked for that?
What? Why is she doing on lipstick?
Can you not get into her business? Okay. Alright. Ready, kiddos?
Yes,
Okay. Page 3. Is anyone not here? Mia, did you get your hand in the textbook? Okay, cool. So you don't need the computer right now. That's fine.
A Quilt of a Country. Argument by Anna Quinlan. America is an improbable idea. A mongrel nation built of ever-changing disparate parts, it is held together by a notion, the notion that all men are created equal, though everyone knows that most men consider themselves better than someone. Of all the nations in the world, the United States was built in nobody's image, the historian Daniel Boorstin wrote. That's because it was built of bits and pieces that seemed discordant, like the crazy quilts that have been one of its folk art forms, velvet and calico and checks and brocades, out of many one. That is the ideal. The reality is often quite different, a great national striving consisting frequently of failure. Many of the oft-told stories of the most pluralistic nation on earth are stories not of tolerance, but of bigotry. Slavery and sweatshops, the burning of crosses, and the ostracism of the other. Children learn in social studies class, and in the news of the lynching of blacks, the denial of rights to women, the murders of gay men. It is difficult to know how to convince them that this amounts to crown thy good with brotherhood. That amid all the failures is something spectacularly successful. Perhaps they understand it at this moment, when enormous tragedy, as it so often does, demands a time of reflection on enormous blessings.
Okay, so yesterday we talked about claims, counterarguments, and rebuttals, right? Right?
You're right.
Right?
Yes.
I disagree.
Okay, so what is her claim so far in the text? What is she kind of getting at so far? Okay, so America maybe isn't fair and equal. Okay. What else? Aiden?
We teach a lot about our failures in the past, bad things.
Yeah, so one of the things is that America is built from parts that, like, don't easily fit together, right? She's talking about in the first paragraph, she's talking about it's a nation built of ever-changing, disparate parts. It is held together by a notion that all men are created equal, though everyone knows that most men consider themselves better than someone. Okay, so that's her claim, right? Yes.
It's like trying to build a car out of a Chevy, a Ford, and a Toyota.
Yes, basically, okay. So that's the U.S., right? Johnny, what are you doing?
I'm pulling out the copy of Quilt of the Country.
Okay, so let's read it first. Have you already read it? Read it first. I'm looking at it. Yes. No, I'm just reading it. So, counterclaim. Then we get to the top of this paragraph. Let me get to the top of this paragraph, okay? What is she introducing? So she's talking about how we're this great nation that's built from many pieces, and then she gets into children learn in social studies in the news of the lynching of blacks, the denial of rights to women, the murders of gay men, okay? She's listing these things that have happened in the U.S. Why is she listing those? Nate. Close this computer. You don't have computer rights for the rest of it.
Why?
I just asked you a question. You're doing it here. So,
How am I supposed to read?
So, why would she list those separate things? She said, we're this great nation built of all these different components, And now she's listing all of these other things. Why would she do that? Mary, you had a mumble something. Okay. Anybody? Yes. Carrie, say it louder. It's the kite.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's saying, yeah, that's great, but look at these things that are happening in the United States. Okay. That's her kind of introducing the counterclaim, and then she's supporting it by evidence, right? All right, let's keep going. Nate, just follow.
Where's the evidence?
These are the evidence, because she's talking about, if you go back to the first page, the bottom of the paragraph, she talks, the reality is often quite different. A great national striving consisting frequently of failure. Many of the oft-told stories of the most pluralistic nation on earth are stories not of tolerance, but of bigotry. Slavery in sweatshops, the burning of crosses, and the ostracism.
I see.
Okay. Ostracism of the other. And then she gives this, oh my gosh, the specifics, right? Of these are 3 things that you guys learn about in history. Okay? And some in English too, in this sense, Spiel and Christine, with social justice stuff. Okay? So, keep looking for elements of argument that we talked about yesterday.
This is a nation founded on a conundrum, what Mario Cuomo has characterized as community added to individualism. These two are our defining ideals. They are also in constant conflict. Historians today bemoan the ascendancy of a kind of prideful apartheid in America, saying that the clinging to ethnicity in background and custom has undermined the concept of unity. These historians must have forgotten the past, or have gilded it. The New York of my children is no more balkanized, probably less so, than the Philadelphia of my father, in which Jewish boys would walk several blocks out of their way to avoid the Irish divide of Chester Avenue. I was the product of a mixed marriage, across barely bridgeable lines, an Italian girl, an Irish boy. How quaint it seems now. How incendiary then. The Brooklyn of Francie Nolan's famous tree, the Newark of which Portnoy complained, even the uninflected wasp suburbs of Cheever's characters. They are ghettos, pure and simple. Do the Cambodians and the Mexicans in California coexist less easily today than did the Irish and Italians of Massachusetts a century ago? You know the answer.
All right, rhetorical devices.
She used hypothorian.
She doesn't use a hypophora necessarily because she doesn't answer the question. Right? She uses rhetorical questioning. Because if she gave the answer to that, then it would be hypophora, so you're on the right track. I'm very proud of you. Elijah.
She uses logos with
Awesome.
like truth, like actual facts.
Logical. Okay. Nate?
She uses ethos when she's like comparing like the people in California and stuff.
How's that ethos?
Because it's like ethos feels credibility and it's credible.
Yes. And she also says, I'm of mixed race, right?
Yeah,
Descent.
she is Irish and Italian.
Yes. Caleb.
But yeah, I was almost going to say pathos too, because she kind of appeals to emotion by talking about how she's descended of mixed race
Yes.
and how it was an Italian woman and an Irish boy.
Excellent. Okay. So when she says you know the answer, why does she say that? Mian, why does she say you know the answer? So let's go over it again, okay? So she says, the New York of my children is no more balkanized, probably less so than the Philadelphia of my father, in which Jewish boys would walk several blocks out of their way to avoid the Irish divide of Chester Avenue. Then she says, I was the product of a mixed marriage across barely bridgeable lines, an Italian girl and an Irish boy. How interesting is that? Like, who even knows if they're Italian or Irish? Right?
I am both Italian and Irish. I'm primarily Italian.
That's what I
and
mean. Like,
Irish.
it's like, cool, we got a DNA test kit. It's like, no one necessarily knows their percentages and things like that. Okay. How quaint it seems now, incendiary then. The Brooklyn of Francie Nolan's famous tree, the Newark of which Portnoy complained, even the uninflected wasp suburbs of Cheever's characters, which if you go to the bottom, that's talking about characters in the novels The Tree Grows and Brooklyn's and Portnoy's complaints. They are ghettos, pure and simple. Do the Cambodians and the Mexicans in California coexist less easily today than did the Irish and Italians of Massachusetts a century ago? You know the answer. What is she trying to do there? Caleb?
Well, it's kind of like she's guilt tripping you. Like, kind of, again, pathos.
Okay.
Like, just like, oh, we know what to do, yet we're not doing it.
Yes.
When was this written?
If you go back to the front page, it was after September 11th. It was written in... This is it was published directly after.
So
2011.
so it is in the 20th century. So this is a relevant problem that we have. So,
Yes.
So she knows that people know about this problem, and she's saying she's making a similarity between the two. Which is, what is it called?
It might be some sort of parallelism when you're paralleling different, not grammar, but the events, right? Because she's instituting all of these, introducing all of these other things, and then she's like, does it still exist? She doesn't have to answer the question. You guys are like, yeah, it still exists. Does it help when I stop and go through and kind of analyze it? Okay.
Children learn in social studies class and in the news of the lynching of arise as community saying that the clinging to ethnicity of children is no more balkanized, probably less to the mixed marriage. Francie Nolan's fame, pure and simple, is the point of this splintered whole. What is the point of a nation in which Arab cabbies chauffeur Jewish passengers through the streets of New York, and in which Jewish cabbies chauffeur Arab passengers too, and yet speak in theory of hatred, one for the other? What is the point of a nation in which one part seems to be always on the verge of fisticuffs with another? Blacks and whites, gays and straights, left and right, Pole and Chinese and Puerto Rican and Slovenian. Other countries with such divisions have in fact divided into new nations with new names, but not this one, impossibly interwoven even in its hostilities.
Alright, what's the rhetorical device here? There's one predominantly strong one.
Ooh, the grammatical one, like the same grammar.
What's that called?
Parallelism.
Parallelism? Okay, where?
Blacks and whites, gays, disgrays, left and right, on, like she used the same grammatical.
Oh, goodness.
Sure.
What is happening? Okay, cool. I can't write on my textbook today. Yes, that's parallelism, right? He's saying that she lists the different, she's listing two sides of the spectrum, right, where there's typically hostility. She also uses rhetorical questions, right? So, look at the word. Neat. Okay. What is the point of this splintered whole? What is the point of a nation in which Arab cabbies chauffeur Jewish passengers? What is the point of a nation in which one part seems to always be on the verge of fisticuffs with another? What is the point? What is the point? What is the point? Why is she listening to these verbal devices? Why is she doing this? David?
I want to drive the point home to really put emphasis on the question that you think.
Okay. Daniel, your hands up.
To kind of relay the message a little bit.
What's the message?
Like, what's the point of the nation?
Okay, yeah. Because this all underlines the ethnic divisions. You guys see that? What is the point of the splintered whole? Splintered means like torn apart, right? Think of like splinters in your hand, like fingers. They're the worst, right? Absolute worst. I hate them. And I spend hours picking my thumb. So think of the splinters that come off, right? We're a splintered nation. Then she talks about Arab cabbies and Jewish chauffeurs. Then she talks about all these other groups that typically have hostility between them. She's emphasizing the ethnic divisions using rhetorical questions.
Did she say Polish people or Chinese?
Yeah. If you go back into history with, so what's interesting is right now we have a big Hispanic immigration and Middle Eastern immigration, right? If you go back in points of history, there's always been this prejudice against whoever's immigrating. At one point, it was the Irish, right, where there was this hostility and this prejudice against the Irish. Then it was the Chinese in the late 70s, when there was a lot of Chinese immigrants coming over to the West Coast. So there was all of those major prejudices in U.S. history where a major group was immigrating to the U.S. So, yes, that's what she's pointing out. All right, next page.
Once these disparate parts were held together by a common enemy, by the fault lines of world wars and the electrified fence of communism. With the end of the Cold War, there was the creeping concern that without a focus for hatred and distrust, a sense of national identity would evaporate. That the left side of the hyphen, African American, Mexican American, Irish American, would overwhelm the right. And slow-growing domestic traumas like economic unrest and increasing crime seemed more likely to emphasize division than community. Today, the citizens of the United States have come together once more because of armed conflict and enemy attack. Terrorism has led to devastation and to unity.
Okay, so in an argument, do you guys want to go with your opinion or facts? Facts, people! Facts!
Facts proving your opinion.
Facts proving your opinion. Excellent. Okay? In this paragraph, she lists a strong number of facts and evidence in order to back up her statement, right? One of them, she talks about the World War. She talks about the end of the Cold War. There was creeping concern that without a focus for hatred and distrust, a sense of national identity would evaporate. That the left side of the hyphen would overwhelm the right. What does that mean? The left side of the hyphen would overwhelm the right. Johnny?
Even if you're like, take Mexican American, even that little bit of Mexican, people are gonna be
They're gonna
Japanese Americans.
They're going to stand with that side, right, over their national identity. Yeah, Jim, question?
Kind of a statement to go along with this. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, because throughout history, like let's say Southern Africa, it was like mainly controlled by Europe, or let's say a very long time. That's why Christianity is very popular in Africa.
Yes.
That's what happened there. There was so many great different ethnic groups and all that kind of stuff, and so many diverse ones. They eventually rose up and overthrew the Europeans. And
You're talking about South Africa specifically.
yes, specifically South
Yeah.
Africa, because Europeans.
So are you saying that,
I'm
How
surprised
does-
this hasn't happened yet, like to America.
what do you mean?
Because America has so many different racial,
So are
ethnic
you
groups,
saying that you are surprised that Mexican Americans haven't risen up and overthrown?
the more dominant white American.
Would that be Irish Americans? Would that be Scandinavian Americans?
Doesn't matter.
Who is white? Who is the majority group? That's what I'm wondering. Is where you're going? Think about that, Daniel.
It could be that people are afraid that one given minority would become majority.
Yeah. Yes. And that's kind of what she's talking about here, because she's saying when we had the Cold War, with the end of the Cold War, there was the creeping worry, right, that national identity would evaporate, that people weren't so into, Kyle, that people weren't super into being an American. They were more obsessed with their ethnic identity. Does that make sense? Yes, Caleb.
Probably their fear was that, that it would happen where somehow, that race pretty much controlled, the government. If they were all elected, say, Japanese Americans in the government, they would most likely favor their people.
I hear you.
To a whole bunch of...
And that was kind of in this period of time, they wanted everyone to have that national identity, and it was kind of gone. So then she says, stay with me, Johnny. And slow-growing domestic traumas like economic unrest, okay, more evidence, and increasing crime seemed more likely to emphasize division, okay? So the more issues we have, economy's gone to poop, right? The economy's gone bad, and then we have increasing crime. That's going to create more ethnic division. But yet, 9/11 happens, okay? And what happened when 9/11 happens? What does she say? What does she say? Look back at the two paragraphs.
That there were suspicions, but people were also brought together through it.
Yes, so today the citizens have come together once more because of armed conflict. So, yes. Oh, good. So 9/11 fixed this issue, and everyone came together like never before. So even though it was a terror attack, she's saying it was all these people working as one. Got it? Is your brain hurting?
Well, all working on one in America.
What?
In the United States, not the world.
Yes, we're only talking about the U.S. right now. Because remember, the Cold War was the United States versus Russia, right? So when we didn't have Russia to like gang up against, that's when the ethnic divisions the country was worried about would start to flare.
It's like kind of like
You have to have an enemy.
Something.
Yep.
Yeah. You have to have something that they all gather under one name for.
Yet even in 1994, the overwhelming majority of those surveyed by the National Opinion Research Center agreed with this statement. The U.S. is a unique country that stands for something special in the world. One of the things that it stands for is this vexing notion that a great nation can consist entirely of refugees from other nations, that people of different, even warring religions and cultures can live, if not side by side, then on either side of the country's Chester avenues. Faced with this diversity, there is little point in trying to isolate anything remotely resembling a national character. But there are two strains of behavior that, however tenuously, abet
The concept of unity. Sorry, I should have.
There is that Calvinist undercurrent in the American psyche that loves the difficult, the demanding, that sees mastering the impossible, whether it be prairie or subway, as a test of character, and so glories in the struggle of this fractured coalescing. And there is a grudging fairness among the citizens of the United States that eventually leads most to admit that no matter what the English-only advocates try to suggest, the new immigrants are not so different from our own parents or grandparents. Leonel Castillo, former director of the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and himself the grandson of Mexican immigrants, once told the writer Studs Terkel proudly, "The old neighborhood Ma-Pa stores are still around. They are not Italian or Jewish or Eastern European anymore. Ma and Pa are now Korean, Vietnamese, Iraqi, Jordanian, Latin American. They live in the store. They work 7 days a week. Their kids are doing well in school. They're making it." Sound familiar?
Alright, so he brings up something here that you guys are probably like, what the heck are you talking about? Or she brings up, sorry. Okay, she says,
You assume it's gender.
I did. And there's a grudging fairness among the citizens of the United States that eventually leads most to admit that, no matter what the English-only advocates try to suggest, the new immigrants are not so different from our own parents or grandparents. What does she mean there? What is she trying to say? What is happening? Faith? Is your hand up, bud? So, Faith, I'm going to go with you, okay? So she's saying that the citizens of the U.S. are not, these immigrants are not much different, the new ones are not much different from that of our parents or our grandparents. What is she connecting there?
Like that they probably all just wanted to.
Yes. Caleb, do you want to add?
Well, yeah, kind of just like they have the same mindset that like we're coming from like a harsh situation.
Yes.
Really, that race is only skin deep.
Well, and everyone has this prejudice against the Arab immigrants, right? But yet, where did we all come from? Well, I meant like our direct ancestors, right? Unless we are Native American, we are not from this continent. Huh? So, some of your ancestors, I'm not at all. I'm straight from like Scandinavia.
So like, there's actually like no actual Americans.
I'm chipping.
Unless you are a Native American, no. Like DNA.
That is so tricky. It's like we don't let over.
Yep, isn't that fascinating? Okay,
But we're not.
Johnny, Mia, Aiden, I want you to focus with me for just a second, okay? Even if you're reading ahead, that's fine. So, Nate, Caleb, there's this one section here that says, and there is a grudging fairness among the citizens of the U.S. that eventually leads most to admit that no matter what the English-only advocates try to suggest, okay? The English-only advocates, here's what this is. So, right before September 11th happened, there was a prop that was passed that said, if you are an immigrant and you do not speak English, too bad. You have to try to speak English. So, for example, you guys know that my school last year, I taught a lot of refugee kids from South America and from the Middle East, right? They don't speak a lick of English, okay? So what that prop said is when they come into the school, they have no services. They have no help. So guess what? You're thrown in a new country. You're fleeing prosecution. You're thrown in a classroom that doesn't speak your language, and there's no help. So we just speak English to you, so in hopes that that's the better option, that you'll pick up English. Okay? So what we do now is called bilingual instruction. So you have to have an aid, right? So if you immigrate from another country and you don't speak English, I'm not going to just speak English to you until you figure it out, right? So Elijah comes to school and I just speak Chinese to him all day and he's eventually going to pick it up. That's the theory behind that, okay? Nowadays, you do bilingual instruction where, like for instance, if I could speak full Spanish, I could teach you guys math in Spanish just as well as I can teach you guys math in English, right? That's the theory. So the way school is taught at this time period, what she's saying is that even if the English-only advocates are saying that the new immigrants shouldn't speak their language, guess what? Their parents and grandparents came from a different country. So what kind of rhetorical device is that?
So in other words, a Chinese can come over here and America spoke Chinese, and we come over here and speak English, it'd be the same thing for us, vice versa.
No, what she's saying is the people that are arguing that if you immigrate here to the U.S., you cannot speak your language. Have you heard of people who are like, you shouldn't speak Spanish? Like on that What Would You Do video, when they're like, you need to figure out how to speak
That's
English.
what I thought in the moment you said that.
Yeah, right? And so what this author is saying is that, cool, you only want English to be spoken, but guess where your grandparents and your parents came from? Right? So that same prejudice that she's saying that people are putting on other people, that was your grandparents and parents at one point. Okay? So rhetorical device, what is being used?
Logos.
Logos, logical reasoning. Good. Okay? All right. Do you guys get where she's going with her argument here? Okay. All right, one more paragraph. Stay focused.
Tolerance is the word used most often when this kind of coexistence succeeds. But tolerance is a vanilla pudding word, standing for little more than the allowance of letting others live unremarked and unmolested. Pride seems excessive, given the American willingness to endlessly complain about them being whoever is new, different, unknown, or currently under suspicion. But patriotism is partly taking pride in this unlikely ability to throw all of us together in a country that, across its length and breadth, is as different as a dozen countries, and still be able to call it by one name. When photographs of the faces of all those who died in the World Trade Center destruction are assembled in one place, it will be possible to trace in the skin color, the shape of the eyes, and the noses, the texture of the hair, a map of the world. These are the representatives of a mongrel nation that somehow, at times like this, has one spirit. Like many improbable ideas, when it actually works, it's a wonder.
Alright, so that last part, like, should have made you feel some, like, patriotic way, right? Like, you're like, where's my American flag? America.
Her
Okay.
voice is so bad.
America.
It's right there.
So, there it is, guys. Look at it. Look at it. So, what I want you guys to point out, just like in Nia, Johnny, so okay, Kyle, so with me. So, even in an expository essay, where do you take it?
Oh, it's on the
Oh yeah, I forgot that.
Even in an expository essay, okay, you repeat your claim at the end, right, in your conclusion. That's where you're like, I don't know if you forgot what I said earlier, but I'm going to hit it again, okay? She does that right here. Because remember, what is her claim? What's her main claim here? It's that what?
That we're all from different countries.
Yes, the United States is made up of this, like, conundrum of peoples. Look, like, even our classroom isn't as diverse as like, the United States is, but even if you look at all of us, we have blonde, we have redhead, we have brown, we have all these other people. Okay?
Why do you hate being
Okay.
redhead? What's being redhead?
So, Nate. When we get back to this part, right, she hits that home one more time. She says right here, and this is like where it gets you in the feels. When photographs of the faces of all those who died in the World Trade Center destruction are assembled in one place, it will be possible to trace in the skin color, the shape of the eyes and the noses, the texture of the hair, a map of the world. These are the representatives of a mongrel nation that somehow at times like this has one spirit. Like many improbable ideas, when it actually works, it's a wonder.
What does it mean that has one spirit?
There's all these different types of meaning. You want to go?
Sure. So pretty much that we're all going for the same thing. We're all running in the same direction. We're all together as one. We're all on the same team.
When those attacks happened, like, I remember my first job out of college, my boss joined the Army because, like, the day after 9/11, he walked into an Army recruiting office. And that happened all across the nation. Like, that happened, people were like, I'm fine with that.
And right after this, the movie 12 Strong was born.
Yes. I can't describe, I remember I was probably, let me think of the year. So I was 9 years old, and I remember this day like it was yesterday. Like, I remember, I didn't have school was canceled. I remember my mom didn't wake me up, and I was like, well, why don't we go to school? And I remember, like, watching it on the TV. I remember I had gymnastics practice that night, and we had to, like, sit down and talk about it. Like, you guys weren't born yet, but this event, like, changed the course of the country, and, like...
One of my friends said he came, like, no one went anywhere for a whole week.
No, like...
Everyone stayed, that no one was on the freeway at all, and if you were, everyone was like, that's a really brave person right there.
So, this event, when the planes hit the terrace, when the plane went down, it was on live news. Right? So you saw the plane hit the tower. You saw it crumbling. You saw the people screaming. There was people everywhere, right? And then when the plane hit the second one, it was still live streaming. So you saw that second plane, and then they tried to get the third plane into the Pentagon. So it was just this massive terrorist attack, and people were terrified to fly. Like, did you want to add?
Yeah, a few things. One, there was also another plane that the passengers actually fought back on, and then the passengers forcibly crashed the plane into the ground. It was I forget where it was targeting.
I think it was the White House.
I think it was
They
and
killed
then
themselves, basically.
No,
So-
they didn't blow it up. What they did was they had weapons, and I think they had knives, if I remember correctly.
Knives were allowed before 9/11.
Yeah, so they forcibly took over the cockpit, the captain's area, and they directly flew the plane
into the ground.
They were aiming for the Pentagon.
And then
What do you mean they had knives and people in the...
So they
The
had
passengers
terrorists
had knives
load
and
this was a whole plane attack, right?
Yeah, this took guaranteed years to plan.
Well, there was TSA, but it wasn't that
Well,
strict.
there was no like metal detector.
There was. I was alive then, guys.
Wait, that doesn't make any sense. So they sent people in the building?
They sent people, so people just boarded the plane like a normal citizen flying
Oh,
somewhere.
wait. It was a real plane. It wasn't like a...
It wasn't
Why
jet.
would you...
So I think
wasn't-
she's confused
No,
as
I
to
thought
where
it
the
was
plane
like...
came
I thought
from.
it was like a plane from...
No.
Fire.
So it was like they
It
loaded.
was a passenger airline full of normal civilians that
Yes.
died while the planes got
I did not know
impacted.
that.
Yeah. So all the people that were on the plane, like people had to like call home and be like, "I'm gonna die." Like, can you imagine getting that phone call? So
Did anyone survive?
Not the
not
plane.
the plane crashes. No. People
No.
got out of the buildings. That some did, but the amount of people that died that day was like.
Catastrophic.
Wait, the one that landed in the field, everyone died in that one?
Yes, everyone died in that one. It wasn't landed. It crashed head
I mean, you gotta think someone's like trying to like.
forcefully land into
I
the
don't
ground.
know how to land a plane and if you drive it or not, but like. I'm like doing
It's-
this, but I don't know.
Why would
Okay.
the pilot
It-
want
it-
to do
it's-
that?
The-
The pilot
it's-
didn't. They killed the pilot.
The terrorists killed the pilot.
The terrorists
Took over.
hijacked the plane.
The terrorists hijacked the plane.
So
with-
nowadays, when you're scared of a hijacking, it's a technological hijacking,
Yeah.
right? If someone could hijack the plane through some means of some hacker somewhere. Back then, people literally boarded the plane. So when it was talking about like the prejudice of Arabs and Muslims, people would get on planes and see like someone from a Middle Eastern descent and be like, oh my god. It was just this extreme prejudice. That's what she's talking about.
So that's how we did, like, if we saw a weird looking plane flying,
No,
we would fight back, but like, we didn't think of that because it was a civilian.
Well,
The doors
how would
will-
we have fought
You
back?
can lock the doors in the cabin. You can't get in.
But then it's a civilian plane, so you shoot down a civilian plane,
with tons of civilians on it.
and then where's it gonna
Well,
crash?
you see.
Yeah, but and so the radios were cut and everything. It was a full hijack.
Well, if it came to it, then they would have put the needs of money for the needs of the few. If it had to shoot down the plane to save the Pentagon or the World Trade Center.
Yeah, I just think no one knew what was happening.
Yeah.
So it was
That's
just,
why they use the
And that would also
civilians
take
plane, because
that would also
nobody
take an
would.
executive
Hold on,
decision.
I'm gonna let Mia talk real quick. Go ahead.
I thought that the plane that missed was actually taken back by the passengers.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
that
it
was
happened.
So
I didn't
it
know
was-
you.
yeah, so the passengers fought back basically, and but like their captain's dead. They don't know how to fly a plane.
Pull up.
Yes.
Pretty
So-
much pull up.
That's
mean,
not how
like-
you pilot.
And I think there
Pretty
was
much
another
let it-
one that
let
was,
it-
that was
let it-
supposed to be going to the White House.
It was the one that crashed in like fields in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's
So-
that's the one that we were talking about. That the
So they were
passengers
going
that
for
pulled
4
us.
plane crashes. If you can, and I
It was the one that aimed for the Pentagon, the 2 that hit the World Trade Center, and the one that was aiming for
Yeah.
the White House.
so the
The one that was aiming for
other
the White House was forcibly taken over by the passengers, and the one that hit the Pentagon hit the West Wing, if I believe properly. Hit the West Wing. Not a lot of people were killed, and it didn't like take out the entire Pentagon.
so
That's
the other thing too, like what I remember is like think of the date like 9/11, 9/11. Like they planned this to create extreme terror. Like that's what a terrorist does. So like everything they did, like I can't explain to you guys what the country went through. And like I was a 9-year-old kid, and I can vividly remember like I didn't understand, and I didn't understand why my parents like they didn't go to work. And so when you guys are reading about this, it's hard for you guys to grasp what was happening. But just know it was such an extreme time in like our history as a country that an argument like this really just underscored how the nation came together. Yeah.
You said that this also happened like it united the country as well, and like people were like walking into armory recruiters like the next day and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That also happened in Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
Pearl Harbor happened, and then there was also people were afraid of Japanese people or just people of Asian descent, really,
Well, and
because
she
like,
talked about that,
Oh,
right?
no,
She
they're
talked
ridiculous.
about that the nation either bands together in times of serious trauma or they're looking for another enemy. And in that case, they were looking for the left side of the hyphen, right? Japanese Americans. In that sense, it became a war against Japanese. Yes.
It was also the last day of American Wars, so it was like it was.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so it was like really chaotic. Like
Yeah. The emergency services probably were not as aligned as they would be normally. Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Was this attack from the Iraqi?
It was from Al Qaeda, which is a terrorist. It's like before ISIS, Al Qaeda was the Islamic State that was
ruled by or controlled Osama bin Laden.
who Obama's Navy SEALs took out. I want to say in what?
Is
2000.
ISIS
Well, it was right before the
I don't
election.
That was right before the 2012
That's what,
election.
like, I mean,
That's what
My dad
like
said
really
that
accelerated
ISIS
Obama
we've been fighting
like
it
that.
for,
How he won the 2012 election.
So is it like-
remember if it was
Yeah, like good job, Navy SEALs.
Black Hawk Down.
Navy SEAls did finally get something
the
like.
way I don't remember. They got us
Sorry,
posted
I-
about
I
it.
wonder
Like,
what
when
it was
this
like, that was
unsuspecting
more,
it, like, a
It was
stronghold.
more on the
No,
Navy
what
SEALs.
is-
So
Right,
that's the
right,
first
right.
plane crash.
Well,
That
Obama
was the second
coordinated.
plane that was going
Yeah,
right.
he was just like taking them out. He's
No.
like, I wonder.
Track him down.
Take them down.
Not that.
Imagine if it was a trap.
They're like.
Yeah, we were like jumping off. So like this is like I remember waking up and I was thinking
They're like, yeah, no,
crashing as I
Well,
was,
the world would have never found out about it, though.
No, but it was
Yeah,
on
covered it up.
news.
Exactly.
And I was 9.
I mean, look how
Hillary
Hillary
was
bringing up how
and it was
she
happening.
literally
So
killed
like no one
Marines,
knew what
was
was
it?
going on. Like no one understood what they were
Everybody
talking about.
was, yeah.
A group
Well,
of
this is
14
how-
Marines by not sending an escort.
So-
She said he's
Yeah.
got escort for
Yes,
the
guys.
police.
When did this happen?
This
Well,
was
she
2001.
2001.
When I was 9 years old.
She used the military escort, which
All right. Shh. Okay. So we could talk about this all day.
Politics.
we're talking about Hillary Clinton right now.
Who just came in? Oh.
He was like, oh.
Yeah, we're always talking about something in this class.
We're talking about Hillary Clinton and how she basically helped kill Marines. That's off topic. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, so like, help facilitate, you know? I know, like...
Mr. Wong came in and he heard the song, he was like, oh shoot. Like, before they notice I'm here.
I've seen the movie and I've read a little bit, but I don't know enough to like help you guys understand. Like I wouldn't give myself an expert power to be like, oh, let's talk about this. So here's what we're doing for Cult of a Country. Eyeballs. So I know you guys know about this, okay? You are going to identify the claim or Quinlan's position on the issue, okay? This is kind of a precursor for writing an argumentative essay, right? We're going to figure out, okay, how does she use a claim? How does she support it? Things like that. So what is her claim? Then, what are some of the reasons or evidence that Quinlan uses to support her claim? Reasons should be valid and logical. So you should go throughout the argument, right, and be like, hey, this proves this. She uses this as evidence to prove this. Then, is the evidence that Quinlan cites for each reason credible and believable? Is the evidence relevant and connected to the claim? Okay? Those are some types. So what I mean by that is, does the evidence not really make sense? Like, remember the last paragraph, she uses a quote? Did that quote work? Was that supportive? What do you guys think? Yes or no? Okay? That's where I'm asking you to analyze it. Is the evidence relevant and credible? Now you're going to look for counter arguments, which are statements that address opposing viewpoints. Okay, so for example, if I think Batman is the best superhero, a counter argument might be that Wonder Woman is the best because she's one of the only females in the Justice League. You see how I'm giving you another argument and why? Okay, look for counter arguments to her claim. What's something that someone could say to be like, no, that's not true. The country is not this blend of different parts. Okay, we talked about one, but what else does she use? All right, does Quinlan anticipate opposing viewpoints and provide counter arguments to disprove them? So what that means is, let's say I want to get into politics and I'm feeling real frisky that day. And like, you know what, guys, for the first time ever, I'm going to tell you my opinion on, give me something controversial.
Trump.
On Trump. That's a good one. Okay,
the wall.
Super controversial. I'm going to give you guys my opinion on Trump. You guys are going to be like, my opinion, oh my god. And I'm like, so we're going to learn today, Trump is the best president that ever lived. And it's
I do not object.
Blah, 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 blah. And you guys were like, well, Miss N,
you guys like don't walk to that wall.
He's been accused of sexually assaulting like 24 women, right? That might be a counter argument to what I'm saying, right? Okay. So you guys will never know my opinion. We've been over this, and I will never have a day feeling frisky like that. But I want you guys to think of counter arguments.
Even if we do not believe in the counter arguments.
Yes. I have to, as the teacher, if I was feeling like that and I wanted to tell you guys, I wanted to like make you guys feel my opinion, I might assume what you might say. So I have to think, okay, if I think Trump is the best president that ever lived, I might think of the things you guys could say that might disprove me. Right? Like, I know Mary's not a huge fan, so Mary might be like, well, Miss N, this happens. So I would have to think about that before I say it, right? So that I could kind of like...
Wait, Mary, you don't like Trump?
I might... Nate, I'm talking! So that I might be able to defend it before it happens. Does that make sense? You want to try to figure out what someone who disagrees with you might say before, so that you're ready and prepared to kind of combat that. Just like if you're begging for your phone back from your parents who took it away, and you ask, you've got to be ready for like the no, right? And your reasoning for why you still should have that phone. Okay? So, do you understand what you're doing? Huh? Winging it. Basically. But you kind of got to like prepare and think about it, right? So go ahead and work on that, and then I'll talk about the vocab. Should I use this?
I'm a firm believer that she does not use
counter
arguments.
She does. We talked about one of them.
I know, but I don't see how that is and how come you say.
So remember, a counter argument is something someone else might say in disagreement. Okay, so someone who says that the United States is not this great nation made up of all these different people that are equal.
Or claims that, like, disagree with the viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, look at the board, please. So, this is basically just utilizing vocab words in context. You guys know this. You guys do this well. Okay. So, you're going to hear the definitions. I want you guys to just fill in the blank using context clues. Okay, it's very simple. All you need to do is use the words. When we do your IEPs at the end of the year, which is kind of like a test format to see where you stand in terms of every other student in California. It's going to be a lot of like this kind of thing. We're having to like determine the usage of words. All right, so let's go ahead and clean up.
That's too. Wait, what's the current argument?
What?
Like, what's the current?
It's addressing the other.
I want to finish.
Hey kids, by the way, do you know the best way to learn vocabulary?
Is
Proven scientifically through studies.
Okay, now you have to hold your